You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium. Available on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about the dark story behind Margot Kidder. So it's over to you now, Mark, for this week's story.
Margaret Ruth Kidder was a Canadian-American actress and activist who, in a career spanning 5 decades, amassed several film and television credits, including her best-known portrayal as Lois Lane in the original 1978 to 1987 Superman films with Christopher Reeve. Her accolades included an Emmy Award, a Genie Award, a Saturn Award and 2 Canadian Film Awards. Margot Kidder's international breakthrough came her way when she played the aforementioned Lois Lane in Superman and also for the part of Kathy Lutz in the 1979 film version of the Amityville Horror, both of which were blockbuster movies. As well as her career as an actor, she was also an outspoken, political, environmental and anti-war activist who maintained a dual citizenship. In 1988, Margot Kidder received a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. However, at the time, she rejected this prognosis and refused any of the recommended lithium treatments in order to help her. In the December of 1990, Margot Kidder was seriously injured in a car accident, which left her partially paralysed as a result of a spinal injury that meant she was unable to work for 2 years, thus causing her many financial difficulties. Sadly, after many health scares and financial woes in her life, on the 13th of May 2018, Margot Kidder died at her home in Livingston, Montana, at the ripe old age of 69. Her death was ruled as suicide caused by self-inflicted drugs and an alcohol overdose. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in once again and listening to this sombre episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a medium, a ufologist, a true crime buff, and a guy who lets strangeness dominate his life because, let's face it, being ordinary can be quite dull at times. And just to give you a better idea of who I am and what I do, every week, usually on a Monday or Tuesday, allowing for bank holidays and busy weekends, I do a podcast on the many wide and various subjects that fall under the Unexplained banner. These include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, and the many missing people that often go unnoticed. So if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any other podcast platforms out there, again, give us a like and a follow. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the dispiriting tale surrounding the dark story behind Margot Kidder. And this week's necessary disclaimer: this story is a tale that sadly involves themes regarding illegal abortions, poor mental health and suicide, so may prove upsetting to some. You listen at your own discretion. Also, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case still remain. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, it will never go round in tight blue trousers wearing a red cape. Ugh, what a horrible image to have to think about for the rest of your day. Sorry about that.
Thanks for that.
Anyway, let us get back to the story. Margaret Ruth Kidder was born on the 17th of October in 1948 in the city of Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, located in the Federal Territory of Canada. She was, being of Welsh and English descent, one of 5 children born to Jocelyn Mary, who was a history teacher from British Columbia, and Kendall Kidder, who was an American explosives expert and engineer originally from New Mexico. Margot Kidder had one sister named Annie and 3 brothers called John, Michael and Peter. And on an interesting bit of trivia, she also had a niece named Janet Kidder, who is also an actor and has a reoccurring role as a green-skinned alien called Osira in the science fiction drama franchise Star Trek Discovery. Margot recalls from her childhood memories in North Canada, and I quote,
"We didn't have movies in this little mining town. When I was 12, my mum took me to New York and I saw Bye Bye Birdie with people singing and dancing, and that was it. I knew I had to go far away. I was clueless, but I've done okay."
Margot Kidder suffered mental health issues from a young age, which stemmed from an undiagnosed bipolar disorder, with her eventually, at the age of just 14, attempting suicide. She recalled about her young life, and I quote,
"I knew I was different. I had these mind flights that other people didn't seem to have."
And eventually Margot found an outlet in acting, as she felt she could, and again I quote,
"Let my real self out, and no one would know it was me."
She continues, and I quote,
"Nobody ever encouraged me to be an actress. It was taken as a joke. As a teenager, I envisioned myself in every book I read. I wanted to be Henry Miller and Thomas Wolfe. I wanted to eat everything on the world's platter, but my eyes were bigger than my stomach."
On an interesting side note, bipolar disorder, which was previously known as manic depression, is a mental disorder characterised by periods of depression and periods of an abnormally elevated mood that each lasts from days to weeks. If the elevated mood is severe or associated with psychosis, it is called mania, but if it is less severe and does not significantly affect functioning, it is known as hypomania. During mania, an individual behaves or feels abnormally energetic, happy or irritable after making impulsive decisions with little regard for the consequences. Also, along with mania, some people have a reduced need for any sleep during their manic phases. And during periods of the depression, the individual may experience crying, have a negative outlook on life, and demonstrate poor eye contact with others, with the risk of suicide being quite high. Attempts at preventing bipolar disorders have focused on stress, such as childhood adversity or highly conflictual families, which, although not a diagnostically specific causal agent for bipolar, does place genetically and biologically vulnerable individuals at risk for a more severe course of the illness. Studies have indicated that the full-blown manic stages of bipolar are often preceded by a variety of prodromal clinical features, providing support for the occurrence of an at-risk state of the disorder when an early intervention might prevent its further development and or improve its outcome. I think what the medical experts are trying to say is, for us lay people of the medical world, or indeed any world, that the sooner you get on top of the manic episode, the better chance there is of controlling it. The global prevalence of bipolar disorder is currently estimated to be between 1 and 5% of the world's population. In 1966, Margot Kidder attended multiple schools during her youth, mainly due to her family's work relocation commitments, but she eventually graduated from Havergal College, which was a high school leaver boarding school in Toronto. Also, in the same year, she found herself pregnant, so her boyfriend, and father of the baby presumably, arranged for an illegal abortion, which was conducted in secret in a hotel room. There, the abortionist filled Margot Kidder's uterus with Lysol to terminate the pregnancy. I think I ought to mention at this point what Lysol actually is, although some of you probably know already, but I'll go through it anyway. Lysol is a brand of American cleaning and disinfecting products distributed by the PLC group Reckitt, which markets the similar product known as Dettol in other places. The active ingredient in many Lysol products is benzalkonium chloride, but the active ingredients in the Lysol Power and Free line is hydrogen peroxide. Lysol has been used since its invention in the late 19th century as a household and industrial cleaning agent, and previously as a medical disinfectant. However, I must stress here that it is not a customary practice to use it for abortions. No way, not how, not ever. I think we covered ourselves there, didn't we?
Yeah, definitely.
After graduating from Havergal College, Margot Kidder then relocated to Vancouver to attend the University of British Columbia. However, and for whatever reason, she dropped out after just 1 year, when she then returned to Toronto, where she found work as a model. After this first short break, in part 2 we will look at Margot Kidder's early career and the beginning of her marital struggles.
This show is brought to you courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times, and over 16s only, please, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could, and has, taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective offers. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android, for only $3.99, to keep up to date with what is coming up at the centre.
Margot Kidder's television debut was in an episode of a Canadian dramatic television series called Wojciech, which aired on the 16th of January in 1968. And she made her film debut in a 49-minute movie titled The Best Damn Fiddler from Kalaboogie to Kaladar, also in 1968, which was a drama set in the Canadian logging community. Her first major feature film was in the 1969 American film called Gaily, which was a period comedy starring Beau Bridges, in which she portrayed a prostitute. And And after that appearance, she subsequently performed in a number of TV drama series for the CBC, which included guest appearances on Adventures in Rainbow County, a semi-regular role as a young reporter on the Canadian drama series McQueen, and as a panellist on Mantrap, which was a talk show with the Canadian comedian and actor Alan Hamel as the host. So now we move on to early 1970, and Margot's acting career is really starting to take off, with many TV dramas and films, including her appearance in the pilot episode of the American private detective series called Harry O, and as a guest star in a 1972 episode of the George Peppard detective series Banachek. George Peppard, if you are of a certain age and if you remember him, was probably best known for his role as Colonel John Hannibal Smith, who was the cigar-smoking leader was the cigar-smoking leader. So what did I say? Was the cigar-smoking leader for the Renegade Commando Squad in the 1980s action television series, The A-Team.
Hey.
Got there in the end. In 1972, Margot Kidder decided to return to California, where she was then cast in the Brian De Palma film called Sisters, a movie which gained notoriety for both the director and Kidder herself, who, as the leading lady, portrayed conjoined twins, one of whom is a suspect in a brutal murder. To be honest, that actually sounds good. I think I'll give that one a go myself, actually. Give that a viewing. Sisters went on to achieve critical recognition, being considered by critics to be among the best American film of the 1970s, as well as one of the most important films in Margot Kidder's career. And so, by the middle of the 1970s, she was an actor who was very rarely out of work, winning various awards for her roles and achievements both on film and television, with one notable award in 1974 when she starred as the character Barbara Cord in the seasonal slasher film called Black Christmas, for which she won a Canadian Film Award for the Best Actress. Come forward a few more years to the beginning of 1975, and Margot Kidder, whilst filming, starts to become romantically involved with the writer, novelist and film director Thomas McGaughan. In fact, so smitten was she with him that, in the March of 1975, she decided it would be a cracking idea if she relocated and lived with him in Livingston, Montana. Whilst the couple cohabited together, Margot subsequently became pregnant, and on the 28th of October in 1975, she gave birth to their only child, a daughter named Maggie McGuan. Eventually, on the 2nd of August 1976, Margot Kidder and Thomas McGaughan tied the knot. However, unfortunately, the marriage did not last for very long, and on the 21st of July 1977, nearly a year later, it ended in divorce. During the marriage, Margot Kidder stated that she felt her self-esteem had faltered significantly and that she found it difficult to maintain a career in film whilst residing in Livingston, Montana. Also, in the summer of 1975, Margot Kidder was hired to direct a short documentary film chronicling the making of The Missouri Breaks, which was a Western film starring Marlon Brando and Jack Nicholson. Later, after being fired for the film company, from the film company, she said, and I quote,
"I was such a jerk."
She continues, and again I quote,
"I mean, I thought they wanted a real documentary, so I filmed all the behind-scene rows and arguments and shot footage of the vet shooting up the horses with tranquilizers so the actors would look as if they rode well. What an idiot I was. Then when they fired me, I realised what they wanted was a publicity film."
Margot then took a short break from acting and did things like learning how to hang glide, which concluded with her doing solo soaring amid the Wyoming Rockies. And then she was photographed for the March 1975 issue of Playboy, which was accompanied by an article written by Margot Kidder herself. Although Margot was already an accomplished actor, it was the role of Lois Lane in these Superman films that shot her into the heavyweight of stardom category. It all started in 1977, when, now eager to return to acting, she read for the character of Lois Lane in Superman, the movie. She was flown to England for screen tests, and upon meeting with the director, Richard Donner, she suddenly tripped while walking into the room. Richard Donner recalls, and I quote, "I just fell in love with her. It was perfect, this clumsy behaviour." So she was ultimately cast as Lois Lane, which would become her most iconic role. Riding on the success of Superman the movie, she was then cast as Kathy Lutz in the 1979 supernatural horror film, The Amityville Horror, which further cemented her status as one of Hollywood's leading ladies. But although The Amityville Horror was a major commercial success, it received mixed reviews from critics, with Margot Kidder herself calling the film, and I quote,
"A piece of shit."
On the 25th of August in 1979, she married the actor John Hurd, who amongst his many film and TV roles was also known for being in the seasonal films Home Alone and Home Alone 2 Lost in New York, and also for the role of Governor Frank Tancredi in the TV drama series Prison Break. To be honest here, there isn't really much written about the Kidder and Hurd relationship, but it sounds like it was a bit of a whirlwind romance as the couple separated only 6 days into their marriage, with the divorce finalising on the 26th of December in 1980. And then in the early 1980s, Margot Kidder became romantically linked to the then Canadian Prime Minister, Pierre Trudeau. In 1983, Margot married the French film director Philippe de Broca. However, although this marriage did last longer than the last one, it only lasted around 1 year, as this marriage ended with a divorce in 1984. She later characterised the marriage to Philippe de Broca as, and I quote,
"Impulsive, I'm afraid. If not a little irresponsible. We just weren't meant to be married to each other."
Going back a little to 1980, Margot Kidder reprised her role as Lois Lane in Superman 2. Although, being the outspoken person that she was, she publicly disagreed with the decision of producers Alexander and Ilya Sulkin to replace Richard Donner as the director. On a short but interesting bit of trivia here, Superman 2 ended up being directed by Richard Lester, who in the 1960s originally directed the Beatles film A Hard Day's Night and Help. Throughout her appearances in the Superman films, Margot Kidder maintained a close friendship with her co-star Christopher Reeve, a friendship which lasted from 1978 until his death in 2004. She said of their friendship, and I quote,
"When you're strapped to someone hanging from the ceiling for months and months, you get pretty darn close."
She continues, and I quote,
"He was such a huge part of my life. He was complicated, very smart, really smart, and he knew he'd done something meaningful. He was aware of that. I'm very happy with that role."
In 1985, Margot Kidder expressed ambivalence towards continuing her career as an actor and was quoted as saying that she doesn't feel comfortable as a performer and as a movie star. However, she did later state that that particular quote was reported out of context, but she did concede that, and I quote,
"I am in a weird frame of mind at the moment. I know acting is not going to be enough for me for the rest of my life. This business is very hard on women at a certain age, and I never want to end up just having to accept what's offered to me. So I am anxious to direct, to have options.
After this second short break, in part 3, we will look at Margot Kidder's role in activism and her own personal struggles with mental health.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk, or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
Margot Kidder became a United States citizen on the 17th of August 2005 in Butte, Montana, and settled in Livingston Park County in the same state. She said that she decided to become an American citizen so she was able to participate in the voting process, to continue her protests against US intervention in Iraq, and to be free of worries about being deported. Throughout her life, as well as being one of Hollywood's leading ladies, Margot Kidder was also invested in the efforts of protesting for environmental and anti-nuclear causes. And on the 23rd of August 2011, Margot Kidder, along with the Canadian actress Tantu Cardinal and dozens of other demonstrators, were arrested while protested in Washington, D.C. against the proposed extension of the Keystone Pipeline. On an interesting side note, the Keystone Pipeline system is an oil pipeline system in Canada and the United States that was commissioned in 2010 and owned by TC Energy and, as far as March 2020, the government of Alberta. It runs from the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin in Alberta to refineries in Illinois and Texas, and to oil tank farms and oil pipeline distribution centres in Cushing, Oklahoma. In 2012, Margot Kidder appeared in a video for Stop the Frack Attack, which was an environmental organisation working towards regulating hydraulic fracturing, or otherwise simply known as fracking practices. When discussing suitable energy, Margot Kidder said, and I quote,
"The first thing people have to start facing, contrary to the advertising fed to us by oil and gas companies, is that environmentalism and economic stability go hand in hand on any long-term basis.
Margot then spent the winter of 2016 to 2017 residing in a tent at the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota, protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline. On another interesting side note, the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, or the Standing Rock protests, were a series of grassroots Native American protests against the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline in the northern United States that began in the April of 2016. The protest ended on the 23rd of February 2017 when the National Guard, along with law enforcement officers, evicted the last remaining protesters. Many members of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and surrounding communities considered the pipeline to be a serious threat to the region's water, with the construction directly threatening ancient burial grounds and cultural sites of historic importance. In 1988, Margot Kidder received an official diagnosis of bipolar disorder. However, she rejected this diagnosis and refused the recommended lithium treatment. And in the December of 1990, she was seriously injured in a car accident during the filming of the pilot of a new proposed television series called Nancy Drew and Daughter, which left her partially paralysed as a result of spinal injury. As a result, she was unable to work for 2 years, which in turn caused her many financial difficulties, resulting in reaching personal debts of over $800,000. Margot Kidder attempted to sue the Canadian producer Nell Varner for $1 million in damages, but did not receive any settlements and, due to her launching of the suit, rendered her ineligible for Canadian workers' compensation, a lose-lose scenario. But while convalescing from her injuries after her car accident, Margot Kidder said that she was finally able to accept the doctor's diagnosis of bipolar disorder, even later speaking openly about the treatment via orthomolecular medicine, which is a form of alternative medicine that claims to maintain human health through nutritional supplementation. In the April of 1966, Margot Kidder experienced what became known as a widely publicised manic episode in Los Angeles. At the time, she had been working on her autobiography when her laptop computer became infected with a virus which consequently caused it to crash, only for her to lose 3 years' worth of drafts of her book. So Margot Kidder decided to fly out to California to have her laptop computer examined by a data retrieval company. However, and unfortunately, they were unable to retrieve any of her lost files, which then prompted her to fall into a manic state, when she then disappeared for 4 days. She was later found by a homeowner in the backyard of Glendale residence and was taken by the Los Angeles Police Department to Olive View UCLA Medical Center in a very distressed state, which included the caps on her teeth having been knocked out during a rape attempt, so she was subsequently placed into psychiatric care. On a couple of pieces of good news here, though, a computer expert was ultimately able to retrieve much of the data that she had lost on her corrupted laptop, and following her widely publicised manic episode, she decided to speak openly about her struggles with mental health and her bipolar disorder diagnosis. And in 2001, she was awarded the Courage in Mental Health Award from the California Women's Mental Health Policy Council for her public dialogue on mental illness. In an interview in 2000, Margot Kidder stated that in addition to suffering emotional distress, her manic episode had led her to experience significant financial woes, saying, and I quote,
"I went through millions of dollars. I have no idea how much. I would buy things for friends, take people to Paris. Once I stayed up for 3 weeks in a row because I felt like I was called upon to write a new religion for women. I was reading all these books, including the Bible, and I'm an atheist."
And in 2004, Margot Kidder briefly returned to the Superman franchise in 2 episodes of the television series Smallville as a character named Bridget Crosby, who was an emissary of Dr. Swan, who was played by her Superman co-star Christopher Reeve. In 2008, she portrayed an embattled guidance counsellor in the gay-themed mystery film On the Other Hand, Death, as well as a supporting role as Laurie Strode's therapist in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 in 2009. In an interview with the LGBT publication The Advocate, Margot Kidder discussed her late career choices, saying, and I quote,
"I'm not choosy at all, and I will do practically anything. I'm the biggest whore on the block. I live in a little town in Montana, and you have to drag me out of there to get to LA, so I'm not readily available. But unless there's something sexist or cruel, I just love to work. I've done all sorts of things, but you just haven't seen them because they're often very bad and shown at around 4 in the morning."
Sadly, Margot Kidder died on the 13th of May in 2018 at her home in Livingston, Montana, at the age of 69, with her death being ruled as a suicide by using a self-inflicted drug and an alcohol overdose. Margot's friends commented that she had poor health issues in her later years, particularly following her lengthy stay at the aforementioned Standing Rock protest camp in the winter of 2016, with her often enduring frigid temperatures. Margot Kidder was cremated, and her ashes were scattered by her brother John Kidder in their favourite childhood locations in Canada as well as in Montana, amongst the lilies which were often eaten by the grizzly bears, partially fulfilling her wish to, and I quote, have her body just left out there for the bears. DC Comics stated on its Twitter feed at the time of her death, and I quote, "Thank you for being the Lois Lane so many of us grew up with. R.I.P. Margot Kidder."
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 137, we are going to be looking at what happened to Timothy Wiltsey. Timothy Wiltsey was a 5-year-old boy from South Amboy, New Jersey, United States, whose mother, Michelle Lodzinski, told police that he went missing from a carnival in nearby Sayreville on the 25th of May 1991. Almost 11 months later, his remains were discovered across the Raritan River in the marshlands of nearby Edison, near an office park where his mother had once worked. Due to changes in his mother's account of how her son disappeared within a month of his disappearance, and her unemotional demeanour on the few occasions she spoke publicly about the case, she began to be seen as a suspect.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The pronunciations of all the names, places was all mine. I don't think I did too bad this week. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Poolar, with special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And of course a big thank you to everyone for listening. We never run out of ideas here at the office for Mark's Unexplained World podcast, but if you know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, including ufology, hauntings, disasters and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, as well as true crime, unsolved crime, missing people, just drop me a direct message and I'll see what I can do. I will also include the name of the person who suggests the idea in the end credits of the podcast, if they're happy for me to do so, of course. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you're listening on any other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember, guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. This show and all its contents are covered by the basic copyright of Mark the Medium.